Welcome, brothers and sisters. Welcome, welcome. Here we are again. Four Mortal Coils become three for this episode. The fourth Mortal Coil, we'll have to call it you. Today we're here to talk about gender identity. We've been kind of tossing this one around. We've been kind of, thinking about how we can put this one in. We know that we'd like to talk about it. We've got myself, Steve. We've got Trevor and Bray with us today, and we welcome you, the fourth Mortal Coil. Okay, so in general, like we've been doing, like we've been going through these episodes, I'm going to moderate today, which just means that I'm going to try and steer the conversation, at least a little bit, in terms of, making sure that we continue the conversation for you at home. So, without further ado, Trevor, you're right by my screen, and so, as normal, gender identity. Our question tonight is, what even is the debate? Do you have any opinions?
Yeah,
Thoughts?
sure. So it's this is something that's interesting to get into, specifically that particular topic question. What is the debate? Because it's hard to know exactly where to start from. What leg do you start with? Do you start with the assertion of gender identity as it currently lives in 2024, or do you look at it from the contrary position, the contrary assertion, that sort of the reaction contrary to it, if that's the way you want to look at it? Where do you begin with it? So, what is the debate? It seems to me, we sort of find ourselves in paradigms. That is to say, that we find ourselves each generation with a certain need to take in the story, the destiny, or the structure of our history, and then but revitalize it within ourselves, make it into our own destiny. With every single time that we do
Perhaps
that,
reevaluate.
certainly, and revitalize it, make it alive. There's nothing more disgusting than the static object. There's a certain need to keep it living. And to keep it living, it has to change. It has to be unique. There has to be a certain nuance to this age, and then the next age after that. Quickly forgetting the nuance of the current, but that's part of the change. I think what we're talking about today, gender identity, that is the grand, or one of the grand pieces of the symphony of our time. It's one of the big changing things. You could look at it very seriously if you wanted to, but you could also take it more in a more silly manner and look at it just as one would look at hippies in the 1960s, which you could also take quite seriously, or the sharks versus the greasers or something in like the 19 something or others. I'm not quite good with that actual time period, 1950s, I believe. Or you could look at it in terms of freedom and the revolution under Napoleon, as strange as that is, freedom and revolution underneath the tyrant. It's the revitalization of an age happening here before us and now. Now, it's not as bloody as some of these revitalizations have been in the past, but it's nevertheless a living change.
I love that wording, living change.
It's a living change. It's the growing of the flower, and we forget what the last budding of the flower once was because we're so preoccupied with the current budding. It's growing. It's growing within growth, and it's stretching and it's stretching and changing and changing and changing. That is to say, everything. The way that we evaluate all of reality.
I have a quick question for you. So, you're talking about things changing as they go. Is it our duty? As like this generation to, evaluate that change? Is it our duty to, because we're the ones that are going to ultimately have to live with it?
Certainly. It's not so much it feels as if you're asking me exactly how does one evaluate? How does one encounter this thing that I've described? For me,
not quite. I'm asking, should we evaluate the change as it happens?
Should we? it's more that we're compelled to. It's what we're currently doing right now, the three of us. But it's also just quite literally the act of doing the change is itself the evaluation of the change. What you've said, you've essentially asserted is the hat. It's because that's exactly what it is. Should we encounter the change? Well, that's exactly what the change is. It's encountering. It's encountering the encountering. It's encountering. It's
because it's all based upon an interaction.
Yes, it's all that. It's all the act of the interaction.
Sure.
And to me, like I had said at the very beginning, gender identity is just the way that this part of the 21st century is budding and growing. It's the flowering, the non-ending flowering, the constant change. There will be certain, and what's strange about that is it seems quite desperately important right now, this gender identity thing. It does seem quite important.
But maybe not tomorrow.
But maybe not tomorrow. In the same sense that you and I look back at the hippie movement, or maybe Napoleon and his revolutionaries and his army of Italy, that sort of thing. It becomes a segment. It becomes a way that we currently encounter what we're currently encountering. Because all that matters to me is me. And why did I just say that? I mean to say that in a century's time from now, we'll be too preoccupied with what's presently happening to care about what happened with this gender identity thing in the 21st century. It's just a tool that I'll use to encounter what I'm presently encountering here in the new age. I mean to say this to devaluate the level of seriousness that we take this topic with, gender identity. I think we should, it's a bit on a pedestal due to the fact that the act of encountering puts things on pedestals. But I think it would be good to loosen ourselves from the current position.
Take a step back
And realize that the value, the level of seriousness that we seem to be taking it, this gender identity thing, is, while true, it is being taken quite seriously. I don't necessarily think you ought to look at it that way right now, or at least not all the time. It's okay. I mean, at the very least, I'd like to talk to you as if you were Winston, like sitting in a room somewhere from, I don't want to quote 1984, but I just did. Fuck. Like with that segment where he writes down in a book, in a little piece of paper, parchment book he found, and he writes down his thoughts alone somewhere. It's not that serious, but at the same time, I just want to bring that out there, that you can encounter it like that when you realize that you can, within your own thoughts, think about this and
Sure.
stretch out your thoughts and feel about it. And don't look around, while you do need to look around and see what other people say to better encounter it. I do think that if you stress a different opinion about it, I think it's important that you stretch out these thoughts and think them all the way through, and then encounter it with someone nearby so that you may better understand it, you may better see it, so
take
you can
them to
see
the
it.
logical conclusion.
Please.
Right.
Please.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so you know, I expect and I hope some good counterplay at hand. Bray, I'm gonna hand it to you. I mean, what do we think? What is the debate about? And feel free to talk about Trevor's response there a little bit.
I think the debate about gender identity today is primarily a reaction amongst conservatives, because everything about gender identity, or at least the ways that it exists and sort of imbues itself into everyday life today, is completely opposed to a traditionalist worldview, or a conservative worldview, because it seeks to uproot the traditional understandings of things that are, like, from that perspective, absolutely set in stone concrete, like buried miles and miles in the ground, like that sort of foundational stuff.
Trevor might say that that's where they set their pole and based a lot of other things on. Yeah.
Yes.
Certainly.
Yeah. It would be like, if there was a tree of conservatism, and the gender identity thing is coming for the stump. It's cutting off, or it's cutting off one of the major limbs that
at least a big
dismantles
branch.
a lot of other things.
Yeah, it's not a bad way of looking at it, really.
from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it seems nothing more like a leaf in the wind, really, like as far as sort of just glancing at it, but to someone else it's a huge major deal. And not to say that I don't have very strong opinions and I'm very partial to the whole sort of, I guess, sphere of gender identity, but like it's like as easy as flipping on a light switch to recognize somebody else as being different. Or hell, one thing we didn't even talk about when we were discussing topic points was bathrooms. Like,
Oh, we should. I'll
I
add that to
couldn't
the
care
list.
less, about something like that. But yeah, so I guess the debate is really more about maybe also how much someone's willing to tolerate in the sphere of what we create, because that's one thing that's absolutely true. I don't think there may be some people out there. I know there are people out there who think that gender, the conflation between gender and sex, and that those are natural. Uh, I guess just because you were born that way means that uh, you must correlate or rather obey some sort of natural edict of masculinity or femininity or otherwise, or well, not, because for someone like that, that's all there is. But I don't believe that. So, uh, you know, I don't know. Give me a direction to run here.
Yeah, for sure. I was just letting you complete your thought, man. So here's the next thing I'd like to bring up. Just as a quick aside, Bray, do you agree with Trevor um, that we should take that step back and look at it from a different angle? And what I mean by that, of course, is you said to me it's a leaf in the wind. Is that the same attitude that Trevor's having, or do you think you have a different attitude?
I'm not sure. I'll be honest. I probably need Trevor to clarify his meaning a little bit. But when I say I look at gender identity like a leaf in the wind, I say that in the sense of like,
Mm-hmm.
just like I would if I saw two men walking down the street holding hands.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's
Right. Just
I
completely
say it's
innocuous.
I say it's nothing to me, but that it's not in the derogatory sense. I mean, it's like
Exactly.
it doesn't tip over
You
any of my dominoes, so to speak,
you
or
fully
it doesn't.
integrated, yeah. You
Right.
fully integrated that
It's
possibility into your mind, into your world, and it's
yeah.
not
There's
peculiar.
no there is no
There
conflict.
is no conflict. Yeah. So that's exactly why I wanted you to expand upon it rather, is because I didn't want anyone to be confused. I kind of knew what you guys were talking about, but for our dear
Sure.
listener, for our fourth mortal coil this evening, um, we really do need to make sure we're on the same page. I mean, I think we're both. I think we're all three um, in that way. Like we've accepted it, like Trevor brought up. Would that be true, Trevor?
Sure, yeah, yeah. I just I do believe we've essentially made the same claim, Bray and I. I would say what I'm trying to say there is fully it can and is fully integrated. So now,
Absolutely.
right now, what I'm saying right now, it can and is fully integrated. These things called hippies. Now that's a
Hmm.
strange statement in the 1960s. These disgusting, foul, dirty, filthy
Jobless.
hippies, jobless, Vietnam draft dodging, heinous cretins. It's a strange thing to think that those people are perfectly integrated into the way that you and I encounter reality, because they are.
Right.
I live
Right.
in I live in like the Bay Area, like Berkeley area, where all the hippies live. Like there are still hippies here. I'm telling you, they're perfectly integrated into the way that reality is. Like both in terms, well, not both, but in terms of stories, the story of America, in terms of the music that we listen to, in terms of the designs and patterns and art that we exist with. It's integrated. It's part of what we are. It's part of the story. It was in fact at a time alien, but that is to say that it was strange and disparate and far away from what the American mythos or story was at the time. But that time's over. Now both of those two separate categorical things are integrated into one single full of nuance, but nevertheless one single way of encountering that is our present moment. They're not two separate things. They're just part of the same story. Both the Nixon sort of ideology there of like hate the hippies as well as the hippies themselves. It's all just part of the story now. And in that same way, I wish to engage or endeavor to get you to engage in the story of gender identity in the same way that we as a people, or none of us were alive, and the three of us were, but as this people here engaged with the story at that time. It's just another engagement. It's another way of encountering. It's an oddity, but the whole point of living is life is full of oddities. It's just another one, and it, like everything else before it, will be encountered. Just like homosexuality was, just that blanket statement, just like what we discussed in the last episode. It's just another thing that one will encounter, and things will quickly integrate and move on whenever the new thing comes around.
Sure. So, if you stuck with us for long enough, dear listener, you've gotten to this point. I congratulate you. This is what I really want to say as far as like my own personal opinion, and I'll try and make it one of the very few opinions I really express this episode, since I'm trying to moderate a little bit more. If you're tired of the culture war, like this whole idea that's been like, brought up, I mean, whether you believe the culture war is real or whether you believe it was something literally made up by the media companies, I don't really care. No one I know looks at me and says, Steve, I really feel like a culture war today. Like, I really feel like that's something we need to do. I really, really detect it in everybody around me, including strangers, that we don't want to do this shit anymore. We want to talk about this like adults, and that's what we're going to do tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, no promises about about the adult part, but you get my meaning, dear listener, brothers and sisters. We're not here to perpetuate a culture war. We're here to really talk about this, to at least help each other figure it out. Okay? So if you're still with us, let's continue. So we'll open the floor here in a moment, but what I want to kind of dive into, before this episode, we had a little talk about what points we want to bring up. I'm just trying to show you a little bit about how the episodes work. We really do put a lot of work into this. So shameless plug. Put your comments down wherever they go. All right. Tell us what you think right off the bat about this gender identity question. What is the debate really about? But like I say, let's go ahead and continue. I would like to talk about something that I kind of kept hidden from our other two coils here. I want to pose the question: is, or rather, are gender roles of the last century scientific in nature? Do they have a natural basis, or are they cultural? What do we think, people?
I think it's both. Although I think time has shown that no matter what natural impulses that a human being has or natural tendencies, those will almost always get overwritten by some sort of social construct.
Or at least they have the ability to be
They,
overwritten.
or sure, that's a better way of saying is they
Okay.
have the ability to be overwritten. Morality is a great example. And then obviously gender roles, like you mentioned, those have evolved over time.
I want to get Trevor's thoughts on this here soon, but what would you say to somebody who, like you said earlier, says that gender is way down on like the totem pole, or is so fundamental, like it's just like that fundamental. I mean, I'll even play a little devil's advocate here. The argument there would be that gender is as old as anything. I mean, in other words, pick a random animal, lobsters, swans, they have gender and we have gender. Therefore, you know, our last common ancestor had gender. So you can see the age of gender. What do you think about that? What would your response be to that?
Well, I don't know enough about the animal kingdom to really speak on particular specific use of the word gender here, in the sense of socially constructed gender in a non Homo sapien species. I can think, swirling around in my head, some examples of displays of some sort of gender to display by an animal that doesn't correspond with its actual biological sex, but I don't know any of those like ready to talk about.
Right.
But I think typically we would see that animals adhere to their biological sex when it comes to uh, how they be, so to speak.
Yeah, what
But
state they occupy,
right.
you know.
But we've
Mhm.
also said in the past on the podcast that many animals are just what was it, Stephen? You said executing purposeful
Yeah,
behaviors.
purposeful behavior.
So
Mm.
perhaps some of them would not comprehend what it would mean to express a gender identity different than what
Then
corresponded to their biological sex, as we can
sure.
and have done.
I want
Um,
to say before we move on to Trevor, I was intentionally using the word gender. You know what I
mm,
mean? In other words, I was intentionally not using the word sex, because you and I know, at least, that a lot of people who bring up this idea will conflate the two.
right.
And so, gender, so what you're saying, to kind of recap, is that gender is something that we have kind of come up with. And,
Right.
okay.
And on that point too, before we go any further, I'll say that surprisingly enough, this is something that we studied in fairly good detail when I was in graduate school. We actually talked about a professor at Berkeley. Matter of fact, her name's Judith Butler, and
Neat.
she's done a lot of work on gender identity and a lot of things in that realm. But if I don't butcher it, excuse me, I believe she sort of narrows down gender as a sort of performativity, in the sense that gender is constantly changing based on your performance, and that performance consists of purposeful actions that correspond to sort of existing ideas of gender, or to make it easier to understand,
Mhm.
masculinity and femininity. And of course, those change over time
Mhm.
as well. And so, um, if I said that I wanted to express if my gender identity was something of like a woman, then I would want to be executing purposeful actions that correspond to the understood woman at the time, which
Mhm.
would be, like long hair, wearing feminine coded clothes, or, things of like that, painting nails, wearing makeup, etc., etc. And of course, the opposite would apply if your identity was associated with something more masculine, or if you're in the middle and there's some
Mhm.
sort of mixture, which is where things to me really get interesting, because these are things that are not necessarily widely set in stone, to use that phrase again, or uh, you can't really look on a map for multiple reasons in history and say, here is a non-binary like history book or something, just because a lot of that information either isn't there, or people weren't considered a certain way, or people were assumed to be something. Also, shameless plug, a really great book called Before We Were Trans, um, that is all about historical examples of different people and types of peoples that could be considered transgender, or are some form of non what we would consider to be typical male female style stuff. Great book, shameless plug there. Go read it. But yeah, gender, social construct, we made it up.
It's like the Jonathan Frakes
Yeah.
thing. It's all wrong. We made it up. He's
We made
doing
this one
the.
up. Completely
Yeah.
fabricated.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what do you think, Trevor? Any thoughts?
So the very thing that you had, your central assertion before Bray started to speak was,
Yeah, nature versus culture.
yes. So that's one thing that I kind of have an issue with, that distinction there, that separation. I'm not perfectly convinced, nature versus culture. So let me dive into that a little bit. So it's as if there is a distinction between what we ourselves create. That is to say, what you, Stephen, Bray, and I create here, the games that we make and play with, and also the state of affairs, that being culture, just to be clear, against what is as a matter of fact, due to the consequences of what is around us. That is to say, nature. That is to say, the state of affairs outside of the crabapple term of humanity, separated over here. As if there was a distinction, as if there was this thing, this whether or not you want to make it numinous is up to you, but this distinction that makes humans something different, something special. Maybe we're recursive and interesting, and we have consciousness, whatever that is. Now, that's not a conversation we have time for right now, but suffice to say, I would argue that distinction is of very little value. I do think that what you consider to be culture. Glad. Well, the thing that you and I call culture, I don't think is a contrast as much as it is a subset within nature. I think that would be a better way of looking at it. It's a subset. It's a subdivision within it. It's not something against it. It's not that the three of us are ensouled and have free will. I do think that that's an abstraction due to a previous way of encountering. In the same way that you and I encounter gender identity right now, I think that was a other way of encountering, a different chess set, a different board being played that had different assertions within it. And I don't think it has value right now. So why did I bring that up? I do think when we talk about this, it naturally comes up when we talk about this contrast between nature versus culture and all that sort of thing. The easiest way to encounter it for me, and the most easy sense of encountering it, is to say that what you and I consider to be culture, specifically culture in terms of gender, masculine and feminine, are these two things, are sort of two baskets full of many different abstractions, a sort of superordinate category that contains many different lower categories, which are full of like very particular cases. That is to say that the feminine has long flowing hair, and some iterations, and another, and by iterations I mean in Trevor, here and now, and I am an iteration, and in my iteration I evaluate, and the basket of femininity has long flowing hair, quite curly too, and has a certain blush on the face, and a certain voluptuousness of the thighs, that sort of thing. And masculinity has, well, I'm really getting into the detail here because it's quite important. It's quite important. And masculinity has a certain. Now I'm exploring the predilection that my mind has. I'm trying to really get into this. So please excuse me if I say something that you just find disagreeable.
Let's be clear. Let's be clear for the viewer. You are exploring all of the foregone conclusions that you already have, like prepackaged in this episode, with those terms.
I'm telling, yes, I exactly. I'm telling you how I feel about it. I'm not trying to hide what I feel about it. I'm trying to reach into myself and give you what my abstractions are. These two things.
Yeah, explain them.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not trying to hide anything here. At least I'm trying not to. I'm certain that I am. So masculinity has a certain attribute as well, and I can get into beyond just what the physical here. I can also tell you that the masculine has a certain resilience or reliance, not in contrast to femininity. That is to say, that femininity can't have those things. But I am characterizing masculinity that way. So one thing that Bray said earlier, time. the time, here and now. This is the way that these two baskets are filled here. Not only in time, at this point, that's where I receive these particular events from my experiences at this time, but also of myself, as I myself, this particular iteration, this particular instant, me, encounters within this place. That is to say, in my stance, in my place, is Texas, and the place that I lived in, and the place that I existed. And I, from that place, created an abstraction of what femininity is and masculinity is based on what was around me. So why did I bring all this up? Why have I gone down this weird rabbit hole here? I want to say, now that we look at it from nature being this sort of superordinate category for all things, for me, that's the way I evaluate it, and culture being a subset within it. What we have is a mass generalization of femininity, masculinity, based on the current state of affairs that could very well be said. A lot of these characteristics are derived from what you could call, I guess you could call them genetic perturbations, or divots, really driven into the river of our field of genetics that lead us to act in particular instances or particular ways. You could very well say, and it would have value to say such a thing. But at the same time, these generalizations will not do to describe Stephen. Of course they won't. It's a generalization. Of course it won't. You're an individual, listener.
Could it?
You're perfectly an individual. You're way too complicated to be grab-abbed within a generalization. I don't know what that word meant. I felt it, and I said it.
Grab-assed. I like,
Yeah.
like
it really grabs at like really the inner cheek too. It really gets
what
in
did
there.
he say? Grab-appled?
I meant to say it. That's what I meant to say.
Grab-assed.
I got grabbed
Shit's going
ass.
straight to my dictionary.
I
Oh
think
my
like it's
God.
added to a dictionary somewhere one day. But what's happening is you have these vague, like large generalizations of femininity, masculinity, and they're used in order to encounter one another, and in such a way that I can encounter Stephen. I encounter him through my abstraction of masculinity. That's the way that I do it. And I also encounter Stephen in the terms of an academic, of an intelligent person. My abstraction of an intelligent person hues and colors my understanding of Stephen, and as well as many other things, as well as an American and an atheist. These characterizations. But at the same time, he's much too complicated, even for those four categories that I just gave you, for those four different formats that I can engage him from. He's much too complicated.
Ooh, let's say something in metaphor here for the listener, and for anyone else who might be mistaken. Could it not be said that you buy all the critical components to a PC? Like I say, this is a metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
You buy all the critical components to a PC. You buy your graphics card, your motherboard, your blah blah blah. You have them all laid out, and only when they are pieced together do they actually perform the function of a computer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that masculine is a word full of all these little parts,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, they would not be enough to explain any one of us individuals.
Yes.
And nor would the pieces of the PC be able to explain the total function of the PC.
Absolutely. That's all
Okay.
of what you just said is correct. And not only that, but the PC itself doesn't necessarily need a graphics card to be a PC, as strange as that sounds. Like the
Right.
pieces themselves are shifted and altered. Like when I think of femininity in ancient Persia, that's not what femininity is all the way. I'm certain, because just of the fact of the universe, there will be overlap between femininity in the United States in the 21st century.
One could even say that our definition of femininity now and the definition of femininity in ancient Persia are probably more alike than they are different.
Certainly.
But the differences matter.
Certainly, they do. They do. And it characterizes much of the story. Like now we can really start to explore history here, because we could talk about like the matriarchal societies that existed throughout time, and how fundamentally different women were engaged with. That is to say, how you encountered them, how you engaged with that idea
in a non-Western way.
in a not us way.
Yeah.
However you want to characterize it, but Western is a great word.
Just a blanket
It's
statement.
different. Yes, like I think of, what are they called? Oh man, I really wish I could remember. They were a people that lived on the island of Crete, the Minoans. The Minoans were a really interesting civilization. They were borderline Nazis. They were complete psychopaths. They would abduct Greeks, like Achaean Greeks, take them into Crete, and then sacrifice them ritualistically, and they did it quite often. But they also were a matriarchal society that were entirely organized by the femininity, the women of their society. That was the way that it was evaluated. Also, that no one wore shirts. I don't really understand that, but
Very good for them.
very good for them. Good for everyone. Yeah, the men wore loincloths and the women wore almost less, and it was just
You
their
get
society.
Tanner to take a DNA test.
I know that man and his
He has
what?
a strange,
Predilection.
predilection to taking the shirt off at any given time. It's in his nature.
It is. It's. I really hope eventually he hears this because he needs help.
Well,
hmm.
if we're good there, maybe we could maybe we could talk about something deeply cultural. This has started in different countries, but it certainly affects our own here in America. So, what can we get into? If we are to talk about the scientific and cultural basis of gender, and I keep using that word, dear listener, gender, because that's what we're really worried about, aren't we? This is the gender debate. What's the debate about gender for? Our society, our American society, and our Western society in general is very concerned about what gender roles look like in the near future. Like I said at the beginning, if you're tired of the culture war, join the club. Maybe it's time that they changed. Maybe it's time that they didn't change. Whatever works for you, maybe you and an enthusiastic partner. Whatever happens, happens. But yeah,
it might be worth extrapolating the three of us, like individually, not influenced by one another, what we think the next, maybe not century, but the next 50 or so years looks like in terms of gender identity. What does it look like? How far does the thing change? Because you talk to conservatives today, they think it's quite literally the end. This is too much into the bedrock.
They think it's like the end of all ends, like so let me go ahead and answer that question. What does gender identity look like in the next few years? You said 50 or a century. I'm saying a few years. I wouldn't hazard a guess. Gender roles through history have been so varied and so different, and like differentiated even among the supposed gender of like the person. For example, being male or female is very important to a medieval, Palestinian,
right,
for example. And once again, just to go ahead and get it in there, remember, dear listeners, that it's part of the unalterable word of God to wake up every morning and say, "Thank you, God, for not making me a woman."
Well, that's true. When you started saying medieval, I was like, well, medieval anybody, period. But also, people constrained by religious doctrine, which kind of goes hand in hand with being
exactly
medieval.
So it's very very important to a medieval peasant whether I was born male or female. But so for our generation, on the cultural way, like we've all three revealed here, it's like nothing. If someone wants to be female, who gives a shit? Like, I mean, like, I've got things to do. I've straight up got things to take care of. I don't care, but we should talk about something really important in that respect. We should talk. We should come back to our free speech episode for a moment, and we should talk about gendered speech. So, what I mean to say is, let's take a scientific approach, a repeatable approach.
Mhm.
If you are born with an XY chromosome, right, as your sex chromosome, and you prefer to express what we would call a female gender, does the law need to provide, does the state need to provide guidelines on how you address them? Bray, I'd really like to hear from you first again.
Mhm.
Does the state need to provide guidelines on how somebody should address someone else?
Yeah.
Well, the state doesn't do that now for people who are, there's nothing that the state is saying that you can't walk up to somebody who's, appears to be a man and start calling them a woman.
True.
I don't.
In America.
which is hilarious because one of my favorite jokes. There's no shortage of jokes when it comes to the gender discussion. Let's be honest. Some of them are in bad taste. Some of them are hilarious. And one of my favorites is that people will get so worked up about pronouns, but just wait until you walk up to the next guy at the bar and start calling him girl or woman, or you refer to him as she, and then maybe the conversation will turn around.
It will go
really
south.
quick. Yeah, but no, I don't think that the state should really, be declaring how anybody should have to refer to anybody else.
Okay, so that's exactly the response I imagined that we all three would give. And Trevor, just correct if I'm wrong. That's not actually the point I want to talk about. Like in this little subset of points, we can probably all agree that the state should not provide any guidelines on what you should say, right?
I mean, that's a fact. Absolutely. Well, that's a fact, but I, Trevor, completely, utterly agree with that.
Right. But so, should the state protect those who do not conform to the gender-affirming pronouns, so to speak? And let me give you a quick example.
Please.
So, let's say that I have a public business. Let's say I work at Walmart. Or I work at anywhere that's not government. Obviously, I'm a teacher. It's, by the way, for anyone who wants to know, it is the law of the land in Louisiana, the state in which I live, that if I see a student-born female going into the male-designated bathroom, I am to stop them. And I thank God every morning that I don't have a room by the bathroom, because I'm not doing that shit. That's like seriously up to the parents. Like I'm not doing it. But anyway.
Also, listen, just to correct you, I mean, this is America. Walmart is the government. They're part of the conglomeration. I don't know.
Look, we need to open that whole can of worms one day about a topic where we talk about government subsidies towards companies that we don't like. But
anyway. I'll go Johnny Silverhand on this motherfucker. Listen.
But so look, to bring it back at hand, like let's say that I work at Walmart, a public company, and I decide to refer to a trans woman as he. Should the state provide protection for me against Walmart? Like, can Walmart fire me for doing such a thing? Or should it be the law that no, that's my personal belief, and so on and on and on? That's the hairy question I actually want to get to. What do you think, Trevor?
Well, I think Walmart is well within its right to fire you if they want you to be fired. I think that's generally when I think of this, when I encounter this problem, something as big as Walmart, if you go out of your way as Walmart,
any public company.
The Home Depot that we were getting called racial slurs outside of.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
That one.
If they're using racial slurs, I'm sure they're ready to fire off the incorrect pronoun.
I mean, that's on assumption. It's a pretty easy assumption to make.
Anything's fair game in the Home Depot parking lot.
That's right. So this is really difficult. It is because now when it comes to anything, when it involves statecraft, if you're asking me, if you're asking the way that I engage with things, I do think of it as I do what I want, and then the state comes in as after the fact, as given, as granted by the Constitution, establishes certain restrictions and things, as passed by laws, uh, after the fact. It's I do what I want. I have the full right to do whatever I want,
until they
and
stop.
then until the state comes in and then threatens me. That's essentially what it is. It's an exchange. It's a trade. I can't do insert heinous act. I can't do so on and so forth. I can't commit murder because it's not that
That'd
I
be very
can't
bad for
do it.
society and so on.
Oh, that part I'm not even looking at it through those terms. Although that's the best way to look at it. That's the one of the best ways to look at it. It's more so it's not that I can't do it. It's that the exchange is awful. It's like the exchange, what I get
Right.
out of it is a net negative. You know, at least that's what I look at whenever I think of statecraft. Now, that's not the way that I, Trevor, encounter it. That's not why I don't murder personally. But that is the way that I approach statecraft. That is the way that I understand it. So it's complicated and it's difficult for the following reasons. Like from that assertion, what I just gave you, your presumption, and the presumption that I first take before I start to chew on it and realize how complicated it is that you can't restrict anything, because who gives you the right to do so? I certainly didn't. And all of these things come after the fact. Punishments and that sort of thing come after the fact. It's just things that are added on top of existence, which is free. Existence is free, and the state comes after to take away from me. You know,
But
so here's what comes after that, though.
Yeah.
This is the reason why I brought that up, and why I do think it is quite difficult and complicated. I'm not convinced, or I am convinced. Let's start there. I am convinced that the civil rights, the acts passed during the Civil Rights Act, were a good idea and saved a lot of people and steered the United States in a direction needed to be steered towards. And that is to say, in a good way. Certain things were done in order to prevent racial discrimination in this country, things that I think are a net good. And those two things are in conflict in that sort of generalization sort of way. They are, because one is the predilection to say, well, everything's free except for what's taken from me. And the other one is, well, something has to be done. And just a sort of more, not autocratic, that's not the right word, but more
out of an ethical concern.
Yeah. Things are done unilaterally to take away in order to better preserve, like a certain.
So I was literally about to ask you, like, so if you can agree that the civil rights movement as a whole was a much needed thing, and that the problem was so out of hand in the Deep South,
yes,
that federal legislation had to be done about it. Well, is the problem bad enough where the state should probably top down the problem? What do you think, Ray? I'd really like to hear about that, especially from you. Is the problem bad enough to where it warrants the state's attention? Like, should we really move in on this and tell people we're not asking anymore? That sort of thing.
So one thing that I'm going to try to keep all the thoughts together here. One thing that I think is important to point out that might get easily overlooked is, say you're working as a cashier at Walmart and somebody who is, a minority race approaches and is trying to check out. You absolutely have the ability to call them a racial slur, but there's no way that you could possibly try and justify a mistake in your
or keep your
speech.
Job. Right.
Well, yeah.
Or justify keeping your
there's
job.
No. It just slipped out.
That's just.
I mean, you are intentionally doing so. Whereas, whether somebody considers themselves, fully transitioned, or they consider themselves like, transgender in the sense of whatever, because there are plenty of people who fall in a very androgynous zone. Passing and all that is another completely separate discussion. But there are genuinely circumstances in which you don't know which way to refer to someone, which is, again, why I will always say people have got to get used to
Just ask.
just either asking, or on the opposite side of the coin, people who are using different pronouns or would prefer that people refer to them
Need
a
to set a
certain
boundary.
way. Not that, I mean, like, literally just, this is going to sound weird, chill out. Like,
Yeah.
you have got to understand that the only way that people can identify, or literally, let's be honest, the only way people can assume your pronouns is by looking at you and listening and observing your body language or whatever. And they will make an assumption. Some people will have a better assumption than others because they are more informed when it comes to gender identity. You know,
Can
your
we?
great grandmother,
Well,
who's 90 years old, may not comprehend
Yeah.
all of the factors that go into a
Well,
modern
what-
discussion.
one thing
Can
I
we
want to
say-
say about
yeah.
that is I feel we ought to say one thing. I ought to say one thing. It's not that they're more with the program, that it, like, understanding of gender identity is much more to say that they're attenuated to the way that you presently are encountering reality. Bray in this instance, or this theoretical
True.
person over there.
Sure.
It's not to say that there is this thing that they've gotten on, and this is the horse and it's going in this direction, as much as this is just another way of encountering reality, just like the one that came before it was this 90-year-old woman, let's say. It's just that they're attenuated, you and I, right now, as I call you by your name. I see you for who you are, at least better so than this other person. You and I are closer in that regard. We're attenuated.
Right. And that's all I mean to say.
Right.
In regards to, excuse me, y'all, I'm still getting over some allergies.
Hmm.
In regards to that, though, you know, I think it's a both sides issue. Like, people have got to be as respectful as possible, and people who would prefer pronouns other than what they could typically be associated with should understand and politely correct somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't give a shit what somebody calls me, he, she, they, them, whatever. Like, as long as I understand that you're talking about me, I'm cool. But I also understand that other people may want to be referred differently. I always argue it in the sense that if you have enough respect to refer to someone as a nickname that they would rather be referred to as, which just about everybody I've ever met has no problem doing, you should have just as little of a problem as referring to somebody with different pronouns.
Should.
Right.
So like, here's, I would like to say this, right? For any of our dear listeners, brothers and sisters, if you are having a hard time listening to some of what we're saying, if you're having a hard time digesting some of the stuff we're saying, good. That means you're struggling with it. You know, like I tell my students that all the time. I give them like a problem set, and I say, people, you need to struggle with this. I'm done talking to you. You need to struggle with it. Like you know, and then like, because that's genuinely one of the only ways to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and that goes for any episode we're having. Any of these really difficult topics. If you're having trouble listening, it's probably a good thing. But what I mean to say here is, can we three all agree that, let's say Bray were to ask me, what are my pronouns? If I flip out about that, that's like a me problem. That's not a Bray problem. Like,
Right.
that's a me problem. And straight up, like, if Bray refers to me as the wrong pronouns, and I flip way the F out, like the first time that I ever have to correct them, if I flip out, that's probably also a me problem as well. I really think that's all Bray's trying to communicate here. Is
Yes.
there's a right and a wrong way to approach this, and on both kind of sides of the issue. I don't even think there are two sides to this issue. That's a false dichotomy, as we call it. You know, I'm just saying, like, in general, whatever side of the issue you fall on, we can all agree. If you're flipping out on the daily about this sort of thing, you need to really think about what you're doing. Like, you know, you need to really think about, like, what kind
There
of
are
people
bigger
you
issues at hand.
Well, no, seriously, for your own, like, for any of our brothers and sisters out there, and thoughtful NBs, you know, if you if you are out there and you're flipping out about your gender identity on the daily, you probably need to pack a better class of friends. Like, that's probably the problem. You need to go find friends that more so agree with you because you're not surrounded by the right people. You know what I mean? So, in general, surround yourself by the people who you think you can at least agree with, or at least have something in common with.
Well,
Okay. Yeah, go
yes.
ahead, Trevor.
So I was going to say, while that is exactly what you want to do if you want to get out of this tough situation, that is a way that you can encounter this and get out of the way of this cognitive dissonance, this heavy disagreement you have with another, if that's what you want to do. I would say, at the very least from my perspective, the way that I would encounter it is instead finding other people who agree with me and get out of the cognitive dissonance of me engaging with this person that disagrees with me now. I think it would be better to stay in this space, this absurd, stifling, no air space of difficulty in this issue point of gender, let's say in this circumstance, or anything else. Stay there and continue this discussion with this person, and come to understand what exactly it is that you're talking about and what you're having issues with, and better engage with this person, and come to rationally come to what is, and not just crouch yourself in what you previously believed before you had encountered this individual. Now, I'm not telling you to surround yourself in flat earthers, but I am saying
really
you would be better off engaging with ulterior opinions than just crouching yourself in just people who a conservative would do better to surround themselves with liberals than to just live in a conservative playground,
or at least
and
try
vice
to
versa.
talk to them.
Yes.
So Trevor, I actually deeply adore that you brought up this point because it segues me into something like I had a flash of inspiration that I'd like to talk to you both about. So Trevor, you just got done saying how we need to assess people like on a case-by-case basis. I'm going to hold my thoughts in for a moment. I would like to ask you both, is preference okay? What I mean by that is, let's say that you are a straight individual, and let's say that you are two situations, okay? Two. Let's say you're a straight individual, and you are dating someone who, let's make this a lot more easy. Let's say you're a male, you're straight, and you like females. Okay. What if you're dating a woman who used to be a man? Like, is it okay to say that's not my preference? I'd really rather date someone who is a woman from the get-go. Is that okay, in your opinion?
Yeah, of course. I can't see anything wrong with that. I mean, you are you.
So Trevor, I don't mean to interrupt you, but like, let's just branch this out a little bit. Let's just go ahead and bring this out to a point here, a logical extreme, so to speak. What if and I don't mean anything by it, but like, what if I were to have a preference where it was like, okay, seriously, if you're less white than me, we can't date. Like, doesn't that seem like wrong? You know what I mean?
Well, so this is what I would say to that. Well, whenever we talk about this particular topic, when I engage with somebody in that sort of romantic way, we talk about. Have you ever heard the term like grab a hold of yourself, like tight, like calm down, that sort of thing?
Get a grip on your senses.
Get a grip on yourself. It's a bit absurd sometimes, because what happens is, and when I tell you something like get a hold of yourself, what happens is you start to have abstractions within your own mind of what it looks like, as if someone that is you, your ego, were to grab hold of itself, and then you become that instead. You encounter reality according to different means due to the injection of different phenomena in front of you. You sort of change based upon people telling you things, but you're not. To me, that's not necessarily grabbing a hold of yourself. That's just encountering reality different now over what you were before. Why did I bring that up? So, this thing we talk about now, I don't really think I control my eros, my romanticism, in the way that opinion, that assertion that you just made, works. I don't think that I can functionally make myself attracted to somebody that fits within the paradigm of my time if I'm not attracted to it. In the same way that you can't wish to be straight, You can't wish to have a sexual preference that isn't your sexual preference. Not now, not here. Now, that's not to say that it's like
So
what I'm trying to say is there's nothing ethically incorrect about being unable to change in that way.
So let me get this straight especially for our reader. You know, I say that I'm a writer. You know what I mean? So for our audience, for our fourth moral coil here, Trevor, would it be? I'm a homosexual man. Okay, it's okay to say that I do not prefer women at all. Like you know, whether they be trans women, whether they be, you know, cis women, whatever. It's okay to say that I don't sexually prefer them. But is it okay to say I don't get along with women?
Well, to me, when you just said that, you've characterized the state of affairs. I don't see any sort of morality on it yet. That's important.
So
you
like
characterized yourself.
All I'm saying is, for one, I know it's okay for me to say I don't prefer women. You know, I don't prefer women. You know what I mean? But I think it would be a very awful thing to say. I don't get along with women. Doesn't that sound wrong? That would be like saying,
yeah, they imply different things. I mean,
exactly, they imply different things. So, like, for me, these are my inner thoughts about it, and I'd like to hear from Bray as well.
Yeah.
Anyone who says I really have a sexual orientation geared towards women who have always been women, that's honestly okay with me. What are we going to do? Hold them down and make them do something? like I mean, you know, you get what I'm saying? Like the absurdity. But the problem becomes when I don't get along with any trans people. It's like you haven't met them all.
Certainly.
What's wrong with you? You know, just like it would be to say, and you know, anyone with a darker skin complexion, I'm really not into them sexually. It's like, okay, that's weird, but okay, whatever. But if
you don't like trans people, name every trans.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is, like, we all know, like, in civilized society, that if I say, "Oh, I just don't get along with anyone less white than me," it's like, what did you just say? Like, what like, you know, you get what I'm saying?
Well,
so
sort of. So one thing I want to say about this is, I think there's a difference between these, but against two different articles, two different things you could say here. The first thing you had just said is a state of affairs. You've described yourself. You have tried to open the door a little bit and describe who you functionally are. In the same way that I personally earlier tried to characterize my my understanding and my archetypal understanding of what masculinity is. I tried to encounter that in front of you and tried to show you who I am, or try to show you what I'm seeing. I'm not trying to hide myself from you. I'm just trying to show you what is, so you can see it. I don't think there's anything immoral or necessarily wrong. In fact, I think that's a step in the right direction to tell you that I am uncomfortable, or that I personally, in this state of affairs here and now, am feeling and not in the right place in the company of insert somebody who's different from me. I think that's a step in a certain direction, and it's a characterization. Now, I'm looking at that in different means than how you initially asserted it. But the reason why I brought all this up is that's a very different assertion, Stephen. Like your actual direct assertion of I don't hang out with women, let's say. That's a very different assertion from insert argument about how women can't be trusted. You know, those are two different things. One is a description of the state of affairs. You've defined what Stephen is in one instance.
Yeah,
and the other one is
I'm not really worried about that, though. I'm really not that worried about it. What I'm worried about is, like, if I made a public statement, I don't hang out with women.
Yes.
Why would I do that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and the only conclusion you can come up with is that
there's
I don't
something
like women.
Wrong. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like,
certainly.
You know, state of affairs, no state of affairs. I'm trying to wrestle down to the issue at hand. Like,
What
Is
what
it
is
is
the
it
But
okay?
but it could very well
And
be the state of affairs, and it would be correct for you to make that assertion. There are in fact people out there that quote hate women. I mean that's a state of
well,
affairs
yeah,
for someone. I don't
the
think it's
author for
immoral
Evangelion's
to
wrong.
call a hat a hat. Now
Can
you can say it's
we
immoral to be a hat, but to call a hat is necessarily something you have to do in reality. Now, if you wanted to, like I was saying earlier, if you want to make an assertion that there's something like insert reasons why you shouldn't hang out with women or something, now that is its own conversation. I think that is a different road and more akin to, and would take me personally further down the rabbit hole where you're going. But the
But
prior
it's
assertion
just
is just
it's
calling a
just
hat a hat.
we're just trading one biological certainty for another. Like that's what
well,
I'm not
this is what I'm trying to
understanding.
get back
Yeah,
around to.
Bray. Yeah,
What
go
is
ahead.
the comparison that we're drawing here?
Yes.
Because I know we're not actually talking about somebody not liking women or whatever like
Okay,
that. Like
so
this is being used to an
the comparison is like if, and I had to talk with my sister about this the other day, just as an example, as a brief interlude. The other day, must have been more than 6 months ago now because I wasn't in a relationship then. I was on the phone with my sister and mother. We're going down the road,
Mhm.
and somehow we got on the subject, and she goes, "Would you date a trans person?" I said, "Why not?" And she
Mm.
goes, "I'm genuinely surprised you would say that." Like she wasn't being a bigot or prejudiced or anything like that.
Mhm.
She was genuinely surprised that I would say that. Um, and she goes like, "But what if they're anatomically female?" I was like, "Cassidy, we just have to have a talk about it. I
Mhm.
mean, you just talk about it. And if it's not gonna work, it's not gonna work. I mean, it's okay."
Right.
So
Sure.
here's the thing. I think the problem is this. The problem literally becomes a problem when it becomes from one thing to the other. The first thing is saying, I don't really like to have sex with people who were once male or once
Mhm.
female or whatever. I really think that that's a totally fair thing to say. Because once again, what are we going to do? Strap you to the bed and make you do it? Like, of course not.
Mhm.
But it's not an okay thing to say, I don't judge trans people on a case by case basis. That's what, in other words, if someone says, like
Mhm.
literally the meme, I'm super straight, I don't hang out with trans people, it's
Mm.
like, there's something wrong with you. Then you need to go home and think
Okay.
about it real hard.
Mm.
Now if someone says, I don't like to have sex with trans people, like
Mhm.
that's weird, but okay, that's your sexual preference.
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
yes.
I have some thoughts to offer here, and they may not
I really want to
answer
hear them.
specific questions, but these are my thoughts on this.
Give
First
me
of
just
all,
1 second. 1 second.
sure.
And then he died.
Wouldn't that be funny if this was the last we ever heard of Steven? He was like,
Goddamn.
"That's great. I really want to hear it. Just give me 1 second," and
Nice.
then we
No,
never.
I thought I heard something. I'm sorry.
No, you're
So
fine.
No,
yeah,
no.
no, I really want to hear, especially what Braden has to say.
Yeah, please.
So few prongs here. First one on the state of attraction. I think when it really comes down to it, people are attracted to different. I'm going to use the word things here. People are attracted to different things for a multitude.
Different aspects.
Sure, aspects. People are attracted to different aspects for a multitude of different reasons. Some of those I think can be explained. Some of them I don't think can be explained. And the ones that can be explained, I think, can either have good or bad reasons. For example, if someone says they aren't attracted to, for example, a straight man says he's not attracted to trans femmes because they used to be a man, doesn't care if they are practically indistinguishable from head to toe from what we would consider a cisgendered woman, yada, yada, yada. The knowledge that they were once mask presenting and biologically male is too much. I would say that is a bad reason to not be attracted. But then again, it is really
nonetheless.
It is a reason, and I say that from the perspective of somebody who is on the other side of the fence. Like I don't like my thing is that I don't care what hardware you've got, as long as you are fairly femme presenting, then I will probably be attracted to you. So I'm obviously I'm
whatever, by the
dip
way,
my toes
femme is.
in the right. I'm dipping my toes heavy in the Trevor pool of this is just my abstraction of these things.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a piece on that. As far as people who are transitioning, I mean, people can be in any particular state of transition. So they could be, if you were to use the same
Including
example,
detransition, by the way.
as well.
As
Yes.
we get older, by the way, that's going to become you will hear more and more people say I'm trans or detrans or whatever. Like there's a whole lot of things that could go.
Yeah.
Right. But what I'm saying is that people can be anywhere along a spectrum. And I think that's something that people really just need to get used to. And whether or not you are, whether or not it's okay to not be, I don't know. I kind of lost my other prong there. I know the first part was about being attracted. The sort of quip was about being attracted to somebody who was of any aspect. I think I sort of lumped trans people in there and maybe answered the second part in two birds with one stone kind of thing. But
sure. Yeah. So I wanted to say something here about something that Stephen, that you had said just a moment ago. You had said something about like, oh, I'm super straight. I don't even hang out with trans people, like that sort of assertion. And then you had said to not treat a trans person on an individual basis is the way I had encountered that is foolish. Like that's not something you would want to do. So I think we've broken into something beyond just gender identity and gender norms or really any kind of abstraction. I think we've gotten into something much deeper here, like something more.
Yeah, it's like you said,
meta.
it's about how we encounter it.
Yes, it's something more meta. That is to say, it's unilaterally applied to encountering, engaging with what is. So when I think we've gone down into something here where it would be better, the best assertion you could make here in terms of gender identity is, and this is going to be unilateral, you could apply to any circumstances, to not approach an individual on an individual basis is itself folly compared to the alternative. It's not a good bet. So here's one thing. Here's my shtick, my way of encountering this particular topic, because I've thought about it a lot before, and I've tried to explain it before. So Bray is extremely complex. He's a multifaceted, extremely sophisticated being. I will never, and it's quite scary here. I will never ever be able to fully encapsulate and encounter Bray with all ways that he is. We so want to be loved. It's something that we desperately want. We want to be seen. You want someone to see you for who you are. You want someone to see who you are and see you in the eyes and really see you here now. You want to be seen. You want to be seen, and you want that person not to run away, as one of your deepest fears is, if people saw me, they would leave. You so desperately want to be seen, and you so desperately just want to be held. These things are true.
You want to be included,
You want to be included, but you want to be embraced, like as if two roses constantly intertwine over and over again. You want to truly exist with another and be seen by the other, and be seen for who you are, and still love. And then here's what's scary about it. I'll never see you. I never will. I'll never see you. I'll never see any of you. You'll never see me. I'll never. What do I mean by this? So as you build and you model an abstraction of what Bray is, what you're doing is you're modeling and creating this abstraction to better fit and rivet and encounter Bray. but there will never, ever be a moment where there isn't a residual error between your model, your abstraction of Bray, and what Bray is. You'll never perfectly
That's something
encounter
true
Bray.
of the universe, by the way,
Yes,
of
your
science.
abstractions, your epistemic knowledge is completely not unfaceted, but not perfectly riveted into the ontological base. That is to say that there is reality, but then you have your knowledge of reality, and those are different things. And as you try to better encounter reality, well, first off, it's all based on the presuppositions. It's based on what you want to get out of it. What do you want? And then from that, you can then model, rivet, and fit a model based upon the presupposition of what it is that you want. And there's going to be a residual error there, a failing of the model to better to encapsulate what actually is in front of you. And just like that kind of reaches into what I'm trying to say here about Bray, or any of you, anyone that's listening. I'll never see you. You so desperately want to be held, but so do I. But it's not something that's functionally possible in this universe. It's not something that can happen. So, why did I say this? It seems to me that when I do encounter Bray, I have to encounter Bray in some sort of way. It has to be done. I want to see Bray. I do. But to encounter Bray, I have to be able to encounter Bray in somehow. And that somehow, Bray sets out before me in small little nuances. Bray puts out like a sort of masculine form, like he does masculine things. Or if I'm being very literal, I just see Bray in my own way as an abstraction of masculinity. And I encounter him in that term. I also encounter him as like a 80s glam rock sort of person, and also a person who owns like a nice car and wants to be seen glamorously. That's sort of the way that I encounter him. This is sort of as a Dionysus. That's the way that I could view a Bray. Is that a perfect way to view Bray? Hell, it never will be. Give me a list of ways that you want to be encountered. I still won't properly encounter you because it quite simply can't be done. So
I think that's probably what I was trying to communicate to my sister in that story. Like, because I even told her, she goes, okay, but like, you are attracted to males. Like, what if this, that, and the other? I said, well, Cassidy, I mean, it really comes down to judging people on an individual basis. I mean,
yes.
If it works, it works.
Yeah, this is masculinity is way too much of a generalization compared to what is an individual, compared to what is like that functional thing that applies. What am I saying? That thing that exists presently within Bray. It's much too complicated. Well, for one, the fact that you even know what femininity is means that there is some part of you that is itself femininity. Think about that. I often do this.
There's no part of me that's U235, but I understand that quite clearly.
Well, U235. I don't even know what that is.
There's no part of me that's uranium-235. I can promise you.
Yeah.
But I understand that to a fair amount of precision.
So what I'm saying is, these abstractions, these generalizations, these superordinate categories are just ways to better get at what is going on. And when I say what is going on, I mean what I want to do right now, what Trevor wants. Y'all are periphery to what I want out of all of this. You are. That's not to be mean about it. That's just to properly encounter and to properly encapsulate to you the way that I encounter things. Like just the other day, we had somebody in our community, our Discord. By the way, anyone who's listening, you're more than welcome to join it. Who had said that they worried. Now I'm looking at this in way too vague of a way, which is funny. But they had mentioned in a chat that they worry that they talk too much, or that they say they type in way too much for a conversation. Like somebody says, like they'll post like a 5-paragraph thing, and then somebody will give them a 1-sentence response, and they worry that maybe they just get too far into it, or that they're taking things too seriously and all that sort of thing. But really, truly, we're all way too self-engaged with ourselves to ever even consider for a second what's going on with the mannerisms of another person like that. I mean, sure, it might cross your mind, but it's a reverberation and it is based in the pole, which is you encountering and you wanting to be seen and you going off and doing your thing. That is the way that you encounter things. It's your ego. and you encounter reality through that ego into these many different places and forms. So why did I bring all this up? I mean to say that Bray and all of these things is quite complicated. And it's not something as simple as masculinity, this thing that you can't even perfectly define or perfectly point and show what it is. It's not even that. It's just that Bray is sexually attracted to so-and-so, 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 this person. And then you can give me some reasons. Bray could go ahead and list some reasons for this X person, and these would be interesting characterizations. But it's very complicated, much more so than we can cover in any one conversation. It's just the fact of the matter is this person is attractive, and then everything else.
True.
I think the really important part of what Trevor said about people interacting and sort of generalizations and all that is that we are better off as a society when we can allow people to freely express themselves the way that they desire, because that means that they will present to you exactly or as much as they want, as they wish
little
to be seen, or as little by the other as they wish to be seen. And I think that's a benefit for people because, like Trevor was saying, all we can ever get from other people is what they give to us for the most part. And so by allowing people to, and you should, listener, I rarely address the camera directly, but I'm doing it this time for extra shock value. You should abandon all your perceptions of, gender dichotomies and things like that and just be yourself. One of my favorite quotes by David Bowie that I'm going to get symbolically tattooed on me. He was in an interview and in true David Bowie fashion was glammed out with some giant red platform boots. And the interviewer asked him, well, what are those, women's shoes? And, the response, no, they're shoes, silly. That is the attitude that you should take with your entire life. It's okay to use labels because that's how we communicate, linguistically, but don't fall prey to these sort of, religiously pushed or otherwise, scriptures of, you must be this way, or if you're masculine, you got to go to the gym and get fucking like 20-inch pecs and eat fucking creatine and, eat nuts and bolts for breakfast and whatever. Or if you're a woman, you've got to, I don't even have to speak for that. That's got a laundry list of things that people think women should have to do to be a woman. Just be yourself, do things that you like to do, dress the way, look the way, talk the way, be the way that you want to be, and fuck everybody else who tells you otherwise. That will guarantee, in the ideal world that we are trying to build, that you are best understood by other people and that you have the highest point of well-being for yourself in your life, I think.
So, for sure, I think that there's no better place to leave off from what Bray has said.
I agree.
And in fact, I'll go ahead and send us off with, we should really do this again. We should really come together again for a part 2 on minors and gender affirming care, intersex, androgynous qualities, and more. All right.
That's quite a jumble of.
Yeah, it's kind of what we've got. But like I say, we should do those in a coherent manner.
And bathrooms. Actually, let's do bathrooms right now. Be wherever the fuck you want.
I think
nobody cares.
I think this. I think the American bathroom, like with the crack in the wall and things,
right? Like we did this to ourselves.
We did this to ourselves. We built the system, and now we're complaining about it. But no, seriously, people. Like I say, no better place to leave off than Bray's. Do yourself. They're shoes, silly. I agree. Listen. Take care of yourselves. Be good. Leave a comment. Subscribe. All right.
All right, peace.